So I'm going to be taking you through the first part of my workout today. I'm working on some trap bar deadlift, and benching is my two priorities for today. So the warm-ups, I do a climbing failure set. So I'm basically just working up pretty quick back and forth between these two exercises to just get to that point where it's like, all right, I'm in a kind of heavier range. I'll wait a little bit and then I'll get some working sets in. So this is a 90-pound trap bar. Love this thing. This is in our Mar Vista facility. Probably will be adding to the other facilities this. It's got rotating handles with a thick grip, a medium grip, and a thin grip too. So it's like really great. On the warm-up sets, I usually work with the thicker grip. And during warm-ups, I like to pretend like that weight is my top working weight or even over that, because what we're trying to do is prime the system to make sure everything is on and loaded. So we'll just add a little bit more weight here. Let's see, boom. And I'm gonna move up quick. I usually like to get anywhere from 3 to 5 reps on these warm-up sets. Cool, so this with the 90-pound bar. First set was around 180 pounds. That second set was 270. I would say my working weight is gonna be in the 400s area. So I'm making a little bigger jumps. Obviously, you'd probably make much smaller jumps on this. Depending on the situation, you could always superset with another exercise as you're warming up between the two. It just depends on what you have availability for. So again, since these are easier, I'll take less of a rest here. Cool. And I should say easier in quotes, right? Because at some point, everything just feels heavy. So that was about 360. We're gonna make another jump to my first working set of 450. So what are we looking for when it comes to a working set? So for me, the way I define it is we're looking for a weight that allows us to stay present and maintain good positions, right? If we're getting to that state where you have to rely on adrenaline to get the weight up, you likely don't have good control over that weight. You're probably gonna break down a little bit. So we want you to be very present. We want you to be able to hold position really well and basically stay patient, especially when it comes to something like a compound lift, like a deadlift, squat, bench, or row, right? Because we've got so many moving parts in the chain, the weakest link is gonna roll the chain there. So if your low back is the weakest link, for example, and your abs are not engaging, or your glutes aren't engaging, that's what's gonna take the brunt of the lift here, right? So we're chasing that proximity to failure when it comes to muscle building, right? So a bicep is a good example because it's just one joint. You can get to failure and you're not gonna have to worry about your low back going out. But with something like this, there's a lot that can go wrong because we got so many different muscles working together. So I like to, A, load this based on the weakest link in the chain. And we're stopping this prior to technical breakdown. So if we start changing the mechanics to accomplish the weight, I mean, it's great. I applaud you for being able to have that ability to grind through something, but it will come to bite you at some point in time, right? Because all you're going to be doing is continuing to set a PR in a form standard that you don't necessarily want to get better at, right? So if your back is kind of rounding excessively, you can decide what is your standard or where you're okay with it rounding a little bit for some assistance off the floor. So for example, for deadlift, one of the common things that we see is you'll elongate your arms by rounding your thoracic spine. We don't necessarily want to get too much extra range of motion out of the low back. You can tolerate a little bit through your upper back and thoracic. The argument though is if you start rounding, we're no longer engaging these lat muscles, right? So now we're relying on these muscles. There's going to be a lot more work through that mid back, even low back area once we start losing the lats. So your job is to maintain your core when you're doing this stuff, right? We want to make sure lats are engaged because these are going to be big muscles as part of your core. The more the lats are engaged, the less the low back has to do, especially if you're breathing and bracing into the abs. So if we can distribute the load through abs, lat muscles, as well as glutes, the low back doesn't have to do nearly as much work. It's just trying to do its best to hold position for us. So now that I've had a little bit of rest, heart rate's down to about 120 right now, I'll maybe start my first set. So the other thing with working sets when it comes to compound movements is we want to stay probably in that anywhere from like 1 to 10 rep range. We don't necessarily want to be doing singles where you're redlining everything. I'm okay with you doing singles or doubles if you've got a couple reps in the tank there. So you have a little bit of a challenge, but we're not redlining every single set. Kind of the sweet spot's going to be in that 4 to 8 range, maybe as high as 10. So if you're in that range with a working weight, you're likely getting a lot of stimulating reps there. Early stages, novice, you'll likely aren't working at your potential just yet. So what's going to happen is every time you come in, you can probably add a little bit more load. And I would suggest making very small increments on the way up, maybe 5 pounds in total, 10 max, right? And then you can jump up pretty quickly in this novice stage as your body's figuring out the puzzle of this new movement pattern, right? The problem that we see is when people start operating at their potential, and let's just say, for example, in a squat, right? If you have the bar over your center of mass and you're good mechanics, and say we're working with 100 pounds, we'll just make the weight number really easy. If you're in this position, it'll feel like 100 pounds. Once we start working at your potential and you get out of position, now this is like 30 pounds heavier, maybe 50 pounds heavier. The knees start collapsing. Your body will perceive it as a much heavier weight because it's losing its leverage here, right? So early stages, you might have a tolerance of strength where you can get into this position accidentally and get yourself out of it and you'll be okay. When you're operating at your potential, and 30 to 50 more pounds might be the difference between some small muscle that's not prepared for the lift to start recruiting over, knees collapse in, something gets strained, and then you're kind of in this injury thing, right? So whenever we're in this intermediate advanced phase, really important that you're honest with yourself, right? We're not chasing PRs every single workout. We're coming into practice. We're making sure we're maintaining patience in a lift. And my question that I ask myself at the end of every lift is, did I own this rep or did I survive it, right? Is this something that I feel comfortable moving up next time? Or is this something like, hey, I should probably practice? And the key here is you really need to be honest with yourself. If you don't have a coach giving you feedback on, does this kind of fit in our standards or our threshold of tolerance here? Or should we kind of stay? And sometimes it's okay to reel things back. You might have kind of over progressed for a period of time, let things get a little sloppy. So it's okay to just reset that weight. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means you're recalibrating the technique. And you might even get more muscle gain out of it because you're actually engaging the right muscles, right? So for example, on a deadlift, if we're rounding forward, we're no longer, the lats aren't doing as much work. A different area of your back might be doing more work there. So all of this stuff does have value. Sometimes being able to build a tolerance of a bad position, be able to come out of it is okay. The problem is when it becomes too excessive of like you're rounding too much to struggle, and all of a sudden, that's really where injury happens, right? Whenever we want to create change, we want to operate at a high level, high enough to make some type of disruption to the system that you have to adapt to, but not high enough where something is ill-prepared for it and then we get injured, right? Because that's going to set us back months. So that extra 5 pounds, that extra rep is not going to be the difference between 5 or 10 more pounds on your body or 5 or 10 more pounds in your squat, right? That extra rep, you just got to find that risk tolerance that you're willing to take, right? Some people get away with it for a really long time, redlining every single workout, but it will catch up with you at some point in time. Trust me, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've tried to game the system. It always comes back to bite me. And I always wish I just would have saved that extra rep in the tank. So without further ado, I'll get my first working set here. I'll wrap up this video for you, but at least you can kind of see, hey, I'm well rested now, my heart rate's down a little bit, and I'm prepared to get this next one. Now, I'll probably switch the grip to more of a medium grip on this one, maybe even the thinner grip on the last set. So. Okay, so very deliberate reps right there. You can see I reset at the bottom of each one. Try to treat each rep as a single. So I talked about this in a previous article, but the pursuit of the perfect rep, right? Every rep is your opportunity to correct for the next one. So one of the things we're trying to do during coaching hours and during our masterclass is to help build an awareness of the different muscles in your body, right? Awareness of positions, awareness of form standard or pain standards, those kind of things, right? So every rep, I want you to remain present enough where you can say, all right, how'd that go? Am I good for another one, right? Did I own this rep? Did I survive that rep, right? How many more perfect reps can I get here, right? And if I had to, I could probably have gotten 2 or 3 more good reps. I know I'm going to be doing more sets here, so I'm going to save some of that energy for quality reps in another set. If I was only getting 1 set for the day, perhaps I might have put a little bit more emphasis into this 1 set. But again, I'd rather, at this point in time, get more quality reps across more sets, mainly because I have a little bit more time to play with today. So volume can be used as a dial. You're short on time. Maybe you get 1 harder set, right? Again, same rules apply. We're not trying to redline it. We're not trying to break down on form. Perhaps if you have a little more time, we want to get more volume, more practice, because every one of these reps is going to be practice for you as well, especially in these early stages. It gives you the flexibility of, hey, I'm short on time today. I'll get 1 set of each thing, in and out, maybe 20, 30 minutes. I got a little more time. I'm going to put a little bit more emphasis into this stuff because it tends to be that the more volume you get over the course of a week is going to be, or like total number of hard sets, typically lends itself better to muscle building, right? So we want to have a good balance of this stuff. If you were to only do 1 set, your performance would be really high. If you're going to do multiple sets, your performance each set was going to be probably lower. They both have value, right? One is good at displaying peak performance, and one is good at building muscle. And there's usually kind of a blend between the two that's good at helping to build strength. So every time you come in, you can kind of adjust, because most of us don't have the perfect hour, 2 hours of time to train with perfect rest periods and get all of the volume and all the sets and do that 3 to 4 days a week or whatever it is that, you know, the perfect program is. So I like to have the flexibility of, you know, some days I'm able to do more, some days I might do less, but I'm going to hold on to that mountain and keep climbing and make progress over time, right? So I think for me, the bigger thing when it comes to progress is not necessarily the PR, right? The PR is really important, but it's that, you know, that analogy of you've got your floor and your ceiling. Most people are always kind of focused on driving that ceiling up, we want to make sure that we're also driving up the floor. I think this is almost more important. So we have less volatility. You know, anyone, I'm sure we've all been in that situation where we had this period of time, life was great, you had plenty of time to establish a bunch of personal records, you look great, you felt great, right? And then what happens when life is in chaos, right? All that stuff, all of your perfect routines crumble, and then you're back to square one. Next 6 months, a year later, we're starting over again, right? And so the goal here is to always be in a state where, you know, we're raising that floor. Maybe we push this up a little bit, but we're never falling too far down, right? We're able to kind of get back on the horse very quickly and then drive up. So that just really comes with this flexible habit of consistency and be able to adapt your workouts and adapt your training to whatever life is throwing at you. So I'm about to get in my second set, but I'll leave you with that for today. Hopefully these concepts are useful for you guys. Again, throw me any ideas or questions that you have in the comments of this particular video, and then happy to elaborate on other concepts that you might be interested in.